Now all of our major doors have been created, and there's still a few things that is not quite done yet. And if we take a look, we can see that we have openings here. But these ones actually don't have doors on them. There's just a couple of different openings, and there's three. So we have 1, 2, and 3. And the easiest way to create these is just to use our drill tool, and we can just use the rectangular drill. So I'm just going to select these polygons right here for this opening. And I don't have any measurements for the actual height, so I'm just going to pick something that will look the best. And for a lot of the doors too, I'm actually going to need to maybe make them a little bit taller. But we'll worry about that once we get these openings done. So I'm just going to select our drill rectangle, and I can just start drawing this out. And we just want to take a look in our top view to see how we're matching up. And I'm just going to make this a bit taller than we have the doors right now. Then we can just hit the space bar, and you can see we've got that all worked out. But actually I need to undo that, because in the numeric settings I did not have it set to drill, I had it set to cut. So I'm going to change that to drill and just redo that. And just match that up again. Make that a little bit taller. And now we have those polygons in there. We also need to do that for our back over here. Go back to our drill rectangle and just draw that out. And then we can snap to that other height that we created for the other door and the other opening. And now we can just create this one going to the kitchen. And we just need to adjust this to fit in the correct area. Just pull that out and bring that over to the side. Now there's something else we can do too that's going to be a lot more helpful in our perspective view. So I'm going to open up a new layer right now. And since we have our image in the background, I'm just going to hit 0 and bring this up full view. But what I can do is just create a simple box, one-sided, to match up with the size of our image that we have set. I'm just going to hit the space bar, grab our points on the top, just zoom in, hit T, and just move that into place so it matches up with the edges of what we can see of the image. And now just grab these points again, and we'll take a look at that left side. T to move, and we can just move that into place. And that looks like it should be lined up. The bottom looks like maybe it needs a little bit of an adjustment, so we'll just grab those bottom points, and we can move in T on the keyboard and just move that into place. I'm going to hit 0 on the keyboard again just to bring us back to our 4 viewports. I also want to take this plane and move it either just a little bit below the ground plane or actually on the ground plane. And now I want to assign this as map, or we could also call it floor plan, or whatever it is we want. And I'm just going to go into our surface editor and grab that material, which we have as map, go to the color, and we want to select planar, Y, select our image, floor plan, and then hit automatic sizing. Use texture, And now in our perspective view, we want to change this to texture. And we can see that our texture shows up in the perspective view. I'll hit 0 while the mouse is in that viewport so we can see that. Now if we take a look at the front view, or the first layer, we can now see the floor plan just underneath what we're modeling. And this makes it a lot easier to just kind of understand where things are going to be going, especially if we're going to be adding some of these other objects. Like we have a lot of the different kitchen appliances, and this will give you a good idea of exactly where the placement should be if you are actually doing this exactly to the floor plan. And you also notice too that I kind of cheated just with the closet doors, and I just put in a regular door right there. If we wanted, we could go ahead and model a specific closet door for that and add that if needed. We also have a fireplace right here in the living room area that has not been added. Also, the garage door has not been cut out, and what I could do is just use that drill rectangle again and just cut that area out, and then we would model a specific door or even just a regular box just to represent that garage door. And really the texture that we put on that is going to end up really showing what it's going to look like. But overall, everything seems to be set up pretty well. If you take a look at some of the doors, we have the handles in the wrong places. So what we could do is just rotate our doors around. And one thing I want to do before I move on to the windows is to actually separate all of our textures and all of our doors onto a different layer. And we do that by using the assigned textures that are on our doors compared to what is on our walls. So we just go back to that first layer. And now I'm going to hit W on the keyboard, which is going to bring up our point statistics. If we move over to the polygons down on the bottom, you can see that we're now in polygon mode, and we can select by surface. We have our default material. Let's go ahead and select that, and that's going to be all of our walls. Now the easiest way is just to really select that default material, and we can cut and then paste that into our third layer. And you can see that we do have one non-planar polygon, which is located in the garage area. So that is going to need to be fixed. And the easiest way to do that is just to select both of those polygons. And I use the middle mouse button for that, which will allow us to select polygons after we've already selected other polygons. And I'm just going to go to our LWCAD Extended tab, and under Fix Polygons, select Make Convex. And now if we take a look, we can see that that non-planar is completely gone. So we don't have to worry about that affecting our scene. If we go back to our first layer, you can see all of our doors now. And now we can easily manipulate these and change them to however they need to go and however they need to face. And also maybe make some last-minute adjustments. So this door, the handles are going the wrong way. So I'm going to use Y on the keyboard for rotate. Hold down the middle mouse button or the control key to constrain that, and just flip that around. And now that's corrected and facing the right direction. We also have this one down here that needs to be corrected. So we can just highlight that, Y on the keyboard, constrain it, T to move if necessary to move that into place. And now with this specific door, we have a lot of an inlay on it, where we have this area right here where the actual door is on the edge, and then we have just sort of a big inset. So it really depends on the type of door you select. And like I said, I'm just using the defaults. Typically you'll want to set up exactly what it is that you're going to be using and that what you need before you go ahead and add all your doors. So I could just go around and fix all of these doors to be facing the correct direction, because it's really just easier to do it at this point than it is while we're actually creating the doors. And keep in mind I'm also in selection mode and not in mouse mode, and that'll make it easier to rotate this around without losing any of our centering or our positioning that we had made. I'm just going to fix that front door. Y on the keyboard, middle mouse, or Control to constrain that to a specific axis. And we could just go around and finish the rest of these up. And now all of our doors are facing the correct direction, and we can pull up both of our layers, view them at once, and use that by holding on the Shift key and clicking on the layer. And that way we can view multiple layers. So now we need to take a look at creating our windows. And then after that we can use the floor tool to add a ceiling and a floor. And then we can start taking a look at creating trim and some of the other aspects of the inside of this apartment. And one thing I actually am going to do is, since we have all of our doors on a different layer, we can easily change all of these different points. So I'm just going to select all the top points of our doors. We can hit T on the keyboard and just move that up to match with that higher value that we had created for just the areas where we don't have a door and just an opening. But of course that really depends on the size of the doors that you're going to be using. But if you also notice, we don't have our actual cuts in our walls in the right places now. So we can go to our wall layer, and we can see all of those points in there. So we can just select all of the points at that level. And like I said, this is definitely easier to do after you've created the walls and have isolated everything. And now I can hit T on the keyboard and just move those into place. And that'll help us if we are going to be animating these doors or opening any of them, which we can easily do. So let's take a look at just opening one really quick. And we'll do the front door. What we want to select is the actual door itself. And I'm doing this in our perspective view to make it easier. We're going to select our handles and the actual door, and then use Select Connected, which is the right bracket key. Now I also want to move to a different mode, and I'm going to change this to mouse mode, Y on the keyboard, and we can just rotate that out using that corner, the end, to position that. Now you can see that with the way we actually have this set up in our floor plan, that door should be on the inside and not directly on the outside. The inside should go a little bit the other way. So we could easily flip that around. We could mirror it and just use the mirrored object and move that into place if we wanted. So we could easily just open doors where we wanted them to be open. And also, if you're going to be actually animating them, you're going to want to put each one of those doors on its own layer and then adjust the pivot points, which is usually easy enough to do in layout, and then you can animate it that way. So I'm just going to undo that. We're going to leave all our doors closed right now. And let's move on to the windows. Now, because this is an apartment, we don't have windows all the way around, but we do have them on the majority of the walls. And we can just take a look at the floor plan and see exactly where those are at. And also the types of windows that we're going to be using. And you can see the windows in all the different areas. We have a couple by the fireplace. And really, for the most part, they're all going to be the same kind of window. So let's start placing our windows. There actually is one thing I want to do first. And what I want to do is just isolate our wall layer. And I'm going to set up a slice, as we did earlier in our previous chapter, chapter 12, where we covered just the doors and windows, where we can have that slice set up to snap to, and that way we can easily create our windows much faster. So I am going to go to our drill tool, D-rectangle, open up the numeric, and just select slice. And then I can just close this out, and we can draw out a specific slice for how high we want our windows to be. Then I can hit the spacebar when that's done, and we're going to go back to the back section and start creating our windows back there. So we want to select our window tool, N for numeric, and that way we can select exactly which window we'd like to use. And I'm just going to select our second one from basic windows. And then we can go ahead and just click directly onto our object in the perspective view. And now you can see we can snap to that near, making sure that near snapping is on in our snap panel. And we can go along and just start placing our windows. Now in this case, these are going to be a little bit wider, so these would need to be adjusted to fit in with our floor plan. But if we had set these up beforehand and created our own, then we would have exactly the same size we needed, and we could easily just right mouse click and add a new window wherever we needed it. So it's quite easy, and I'm just going to go around and finish up these windows. But first I just want to note that depending on which side you decide to create your window on, and this also applies to doors as well, as I was talking about before with rotating around our doors, if we would have selected the wall on the other side rather than the main side that we were on, we wouldn't have needed to actually rotate around our door. And the same thing goes with the windows. So it really does depend its direction and where the certain accents are, depending on which side of the wall we select on first. And now we have all of our windows added, and what we want to do is just isolate those windows onto their own layer. So I'm going to hit W on the keyboard, and by surface select default, hit the little plus sign to select all of our walls. We can cut and then paste that into another layer. I'm also going to hit Q to change the surface and call those walls. So now we're no longer on the default, and we can select those as walls. You also notice that if you take a look at the bottom over here, we have one of our doors that didn't quite go through all the way. So what I can do is easily just select that polygon, those polygons right there, and we're going to switch over to our 4 view. And all we need to do is just create a drill. So I'm going to use the D rectangle. And we just want to pull that out and match that up using our snapping options. And now you can see that's been taken care of. So we don't have to worry about that little bit of a bottom anymore. And if needed, you could always change the top if you end up going outside of your door. But let's just take a look at all of our layers. And I'm going to turn off that second one. That's just our floor plan. But now we can see we basically have the majority of this model created. And let's just add our floor now and our ceiling. So we're going to go to our wall layer. And under Architectural Basic, we have a floor. So we can select floor. Just going to click on our object and open the numeric. Set this to floor so it's not on ceiling. And now right now it's not going to be creating our entire object because some of the different aspects we have set up. And you can see it's only really creating in one area. So we just need to go around and if needed, actually manually select that area. But if we take a look, it looks like overall, in the actual model itself, that we have the wall going in the right places. And if we switch to ceiling mode, we can see that it is displayed correctly. So in this case, what I'm actually going to do is just use our ceiling, and I'm just going to keep the default values of its height, and then select our ceiling and cut that, paste it down to another layer. Make sure that our surface for this is set to a ceiling, and if you take a look in our current surfaces, it is not assigned to that. So we'll hit Q, type in ceiling, click OK, and now I'm going to put our walls in the background. And what we can do is just select all of these polygons, and I'm going to copy and paste, and then use our move snap just to select our top corner and then snap that to the bottom corner. So now we have our floor as well, so we can assign this as floor and take a look at everything all together. 0 on the keyboard to bring it up in perspective view. And we can see the outside. And we still need to cut out that garage area. So we'll just go and do that in a sec, but I'm just going to move in here so we can see kind of on the inside. And now really with the perspective view and our position, I will have to set this correctly in order to really view it all the way, at least correctly in our perspective view. But this gives us a good idea of how it is going to look. Hit A on the keyboard just to change our viewport so we can see the whole thing again. And if we want, we could just open up our layers so that we don't see our floor or ceiling. And I just want to cut out our area for our garage door. So we're going to take a look, and we'll just switch to our wall layer. I'm going to select these polygons that we want to cut, go to the drill rectangle, and just pull that out. Hit the space bar, and now we have that area cut out for our garage door, and we can just add a box in there if we wanted, just a little bit thinner than the wall itself, just to represent that garage door. So we're just going to move into another layer, or a new layer, and we'll just go to the Create tab, the Creative Elements, select our box, and I just want to bring that within the bounds of our walls. And now we have a material, or a box that we can use to assign a material for our garage door. Just type that in. And we can take a look at all of our layers together and see that showing up. Now, if we wanted to create trim, there's a couple of different ways we can do that. It really depends on how precise you want to be about the trim, because there's a number of different ways we can do it. Now, at this point, we have a lot of convex polygons because we needed to fix some of those display errors, but that can affect us when we're trying to use the engraver tool to create our walls or our trim from our walls. And that's because typically one of the easiest ways to create our trim is just to use the knife tool. And what we would end up doing, or even we could use the drill tool as slice. And what we want to do is slice out the tops and the bottoms of all of our polygons just a little bit. And then we'd have these polygons left behind all the way around that we can easily use to create our trim. Now, because we have some of these polygons, if we take a look, that have these different divisions in them, that might end up being difficult. And what we're going to have to do is actually go in and merge some of those polys together, either before or after we slice out those areas. There's also another way we can create trim, and that's if you're not going to be extremely specific about it, but we can still get a really good look, and that's just by using the profiler tool. And actually, that's just the method I'm going to show you first. And we're going to start out just by selecting this main room that we use to position our grid and our image on the grid. And we're just going to take a look at this in the perspective view. And I'm going to use this on another layer, just showing our walls in the background. And what we can do is just go back to our LWCAD tab. We're going to select our rectangle, hit 0 on the keyboard so that we can view this in the top view to actually draw this out. And I just want to snap to our existing lines that we have. And I'm just going to hit T to move, and we can move this up to the top, or we can go to the extended tab, use Move Snap, and just snap that onto the top. And that way, it'll be perfect. But let's just take a look at these. And right now, we really can't see that line. If we move this to Textured Wire, then we'll be able to see our curve show up. But now with this curve in here, we can easily create the top. So what I'm going to do is just go to our polygon detail, select our profiler, and just move this out a little bit. I'm also going to switch this back to texture, and that way we don't see all of those lines. Now, one of the disadvantages of using this tool is that we're going to be going inside of our wall quite a bit. And if I open up the numeric, you can see that the type of shape that we have is really not going to cut it for this. We can move to handrails, which will give us something a little bit better. But we also are going to need to adjust our width and also flip this around. So we'll rotate that 90 degrees twice. And we're probably going to need to adjust our pivot as well, just to get that to fit in there correctly. And if we set that to 4, then you can see we're pretty much all the way inside, and we end up with a good looking trim. We can adjust our width, make that a little bit lower. And now we want to remember our settings. I'm going to set this to 2.6 inches exactly, and that way we can use that as an overall value to finish off all of the trim. But we can see now, if we take a look at our wall layer with the trim on there, it looks pretty good. And we could just go around with all of our different rooms and just create the trim for the top. And also what we'll need to do is the same thing for the trim on the bottom. But what we'll also need to do is cut out the area for the doors so that we don't have the trim going through the doors. And the best way to do that is just to set up your top trim first. And then we're going to mirror our top trim down to the bottom. And we want to make sure we're mirroring it because we're not using a symmetrical trim layer. And if we were just to copy and paste, it wouldn't look right. But then once we have our top trim mirrored to the bottom, we can just use the drill rectangle tool to cut out all of our different gaps that we need for all of our doors. So I'm just going to go around and we can select our different areas to draw out. And if we need to, another quick thing we can do is just use the line tool to draw out the tops. So if we take a look at this wall layer that we have right here, I'm just going to switch this to our perspective view, or sorry, just put that in the background, and we're still in our perspective view. But it might be difficult to see exactly where the points are that we need, unless we kind of rotate around and take a look. But let's go back to our LWCAD regular tab, and under primitive select line. Because the line tool, what we can do is just click directly on the points that we want for the top, and just rotate around just so that we can see our different areas. And then we can click on the end to close that off. Switch to texture wire just to make sure it's completely closed, and it's not. So open up numeric, select close line, and that will close that off. We can hit the spacebar, change that back to texture, and now we want to select our polygon, go back to the LWCAD Extended tab, go to our profiler, numeric, activate, and then we can just pull that out. And we're also going to need to make those changes again. Rotate it 90 degrees until it faces the correct direction. And we need to make our width 2.6 inches. And now we have the trim for this other room. So using that tool, just by using the line tool, we can specify our areas a little bit easier. If you have a square room, you could just use the rectangle tool. Otherwise, you can just draw out with the line tool, which is quite easy. So I'm just going to go around and finish up the top of our trim, and then we're going to work on the bottom trim.